Thanks for tuning into the For Love of the Game podcast, where we uncover the most cherished stories of America's favorite pastime. Woven into the DNA of our country are tales from our backyards and sandlots, summer leagues to the big leagues. Every fan has a personal connection, a memory, resonating in each of us. It takes us on a journey to a time long forgotten, or a moment in our youth. That first time we heard the crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, the smell of the fresh cut grass. And these cherished recollections sit there in the back of our minds, beckoning us back to the game that we know and love, our reason to come back home, a reason for our love of the game. So joining the show today is a former member of the legendary Portland Mavericks baseball team and inventor of Big League Chew bubblegum, Mr. Rob Nelson. Rob, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you've been involved with the game of baseball and around it for quite some time now, but I'm curious, where did it all start for you? Who introduced you to the game?
I grew up on Long Island, South Shore Long Island, Massapequa. Two older brothers, one played lacrosse, one played baseball. My dad was a big baseball nut. Massapequa International Little League taught me everything I knew. And when I go back to Long Island, I live in Oregon now, but when I go back to Long Island, I drive by Carmen Road School where I got my first base hit, where I threw my first inning. It's pretty cool. I'm really grateful for that community. It's more known for the home of Jerry Seinfeld and the Baldwin brothers, but you know, it's kind of the birthplace of Big League Chew when you think about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm sure a lot more baseball fans can relate to that for sure. But being on Long Island, were you a Yankees or a Mets fan? Who was your favorite team growing up?
You know, it's interesting. My big brother Harry signed with the Yankees in the early 60s. So, and I was always a big Whitey Ford fan because he was a blonde guy, left-handed. In fact, I've worn number 16 ever since I saw Whitey Ford pitch. You know, even the guy in the pouch of Big League Chew has number 16. So there was that connection. But, you know, the Mets were born in 62 when I was 13. And I went to the first ever Met game in the Polo Grounds with another maybe 12,000 fans because it was a drizzly day. But my friend Billy Lukasik and I went into the city. My dad was NYPD at the time, drove us into uptown Manhattan and said, Rob, if it rains, go see a movie. I'll pick you up at 5 o'clock. And there we were, two kids in the middle of New York City. So I was kind of a Met fan. And then, of course, they were the abysmal, the amazing Mets in the early 60s. And then when I finally got to college up at Cornell, I remember being in the student union in 1969 when they won the whole thing. Oddly enough, on my dad's birthday, so that's pretty cool. In fact, it's coming up. It was the 16th of October, 1969, when the Mets won the World Series. So I guess I'm giving it away. I'm kind of a Mets fan.
Yeah, how could you not be with a story like that? So you mentioned Whitey Ford. Were there any other players you loved watching when you were growing up?
You know, it's interesting because I became partners with Jim Bouton, who was a former Yankee, and I love the way he pitched. I love his tenacity, you know, in the middle 60s. So he was kind of a hero, and then he became a teammate, and then he became a business partner. So that was pretty cool. But there are other players as I was growing up that just really struck a chord with me. Bob Gibson, now the late, great Bob Gibson, was just so focused, and he'd get on the mound and he would pitch and just get his job done. Sandy Koufax was outrageously elegant, and I knew I could never be him. So I always kind of rooted for left-handed pitchers, you know, the Jamie Moyers, the Tommy Johns, but of course the chairman of the board, Whitey Ford. So I'm kind of a card-carrying member of the left-handed nation. I kind of relate to that, you know.
Yeah, definitely the lefties. You always got to watch out for those guys.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned, you know, watching the Mets when they won in 69 and everything, but do you have any particular moments that stick out to you from just watching, any, you know, ballpark memories in particular?
You know, that's a really good question. I think the Whitey Ford stuff really stays with me. All the scoreless innings that he threw in the postseason at that time, just the World Series, of course. Remember Koufax's perfect game against the Cubs. You know, there's some Met memories. My brother Harry was at the Tom Seaver game where he gave up one scratch single in the 9th inning. And it's funny, we don't talk a whole lot about remember this, remember that. We remember little instances. early Mets Ron Hunt always got hit by pitches.
Obviously, you grew up in New York at prime time, right in the golden era of baseball, as some would say. And you played? You mentioned Little League, and then all throughout high school, right?
Well, I went to Berner High School. Was the second high school in the Massapequa community, and my brother Ed and I were really lucky. We talk about it a lot because when the school split into two schools, it was like an expansion draft. So Eddie got to play varsity lacrosse as a sophomore, and I got to pitch for Mr. Don Lang as a sophomore as well. And Coach Lang was brilliant. He was a minor league catcher. He's the only high school coach Berner High School ever had. It had like a 40-year run, and then the population shifts were such that they're back to one high school in Massapequa. But Mr. Lang was he was really savvy in that, or we'd have almost like, it felt like a minor league schedule where a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, you played the same team. And Mr. Lang always pitched me on the Thursday because the other teams would throw their ace on Monday, and then on 2 days rest, throw them again on Thursday. So I was going against the top dogs in South Shore, Long Island, but I had enough stuff and a good team behind me that I beat a lot of really all-county guys. And it gave me a tremendous boost of confidence that Coach Lang would do that for me. My goal, quite frankly, as a kid was to grow up and become a school teacher and a baseball coach like Mr. Lang. Aside from my dad and my brothers and my mom, the whole family, Mr. Lang was my first hero. I love the way he treated the game. I love the way he treated the players. He was just a wonderful man. And Massapequa is still a hotbed of baseball and other sports as well. It was one of those post-World War II communities. Every home in our neighborhood was the exact same construction. And we got the extra length in the backyard because the first thing my dad did was build a pitcher's mound and a backstop for Harry and for me. So it was a really charmed life and a really, how can I say it, a very supportive community, not only within the schools and the sports, but the church, and just everybody kind of looked after each other. It really feels in many ways like, feels to me like it was a Norman Rockwell painting, that people really had each other's back. In 1964, when I was a high school freshman, we had a senior Little League team, Massapequa International Little League. 4 teams in the league, 60 kids in the league. You had a 30% chance of making the all-star team. And the 18 guys that made that team ran the table. We won the Senior Little League World Series 1964, August of 64, at the Louisville Fairgrounds in front of about 12,000 people. It was a league where you either took your bike or you walked to Carmen Road School to play. And the coaches were all volunteer coaches. Mr. Andy Sinise, Joe Quinn, detective, NYPD, was our head coach. And it was just no frills, unadorned stuff. You know, when you play in a 4-team league, there's a game on Tuesday that maybe I'd be pitching in. And then the other 2 teams would play on Thursday. You'd go and you'd watch them. And then on Saturday, you had the early game or the late game. It was ultimate simplicity. And the fact that we got off the plane at JFK and got on that bus and we drove into Massapequa, I thought the fans were going to knock the bus over. It was so exciting. And that was my first baseball road trip out of Massapequa to JFK, down to Kentucky. I couldn't believe it. And I said, this could be a fun way to live. And I've been lucky enough to do that. Didn't make it to the big leagues. I wasn't even close. But Massapequa set the table for me. There's no question about that.
Yeah, it was certainly definitely got to give a nod to all the coaches who are instilling that love for the game in the youngsters and continue to do so today. And we definitely need more of those people like your coaches in the baseball community. But you certainly stretched out your playing career as long as you could. And I would love to get into how you ended up trying out for the Portland Mavericks. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, when I got out of Cornell, I only had one good year of college baseball, and it was my senior year. And I had kind of a peripatetic route in my college career. I started off at D3 Marietta College, great small school, but I was really a New York guy. And I left after 1 year. The highlight was pitching against Mike Schmidt, who was at Ohio University before he learned how to hit. So that was a good thing. So timing is everything. But I went from Marietta to Nassau Community College, lucky enough to be on a team that went to the Junior College World Series in Grand Junction, Colorado, 1969. My grades were good enough that I went from community college to the Ivy League, and I felt like I got called up to the Yankees. When I walked on that Cornell campus, I couldn't believe how lucky I was. And my nickname for the longest time has been Lucky Lefty. But I had that one good year at Cornell. Nobody drafted me. Nobody really thought I had much stuff except myself. And I went down to spring training just on my own. I got a 3-week look with the Cardinals. Didn't work out. Went back to grad school. I was teaching in upstate New York. And I overheard 2 guys in a tavern, the Someplace Inn Tavern in Ithaca, New York, 2 Ithaca College ball players talking about this letter their coach had received. A club in Cape Town, South Africa was looking for a couple of ball players. I didn't say anything to the guys because I didn't know them, number one. And number two, I didn't want them to think that other people were going to be looking into that. But quietly the next day, I went to Coach Ted Thorin at Cornell, and I said, what do you know about South Africa baseball? He said, Rob, I got this letter. How did you hear about it? And I told him. I interviewed for the position. I got it. I had a teaching job, and I was in Cape Town. And a lot of people think I'm kind of adventurous, but, October 1973, I'm 24 years old. I get on a plane, and I'm going halfway around the world, and they say, well, weren't you intimidated? The thing is, when you're playing baseball, you get off the plane, and you got 20 friends on day one, going out for steaks and a couple of pints, and I took off from there. I thought it was going to be a 6-month jaunt. I ended up staying there for 2 and 3 seasons, and my dad had sent me some sports clippings from the Sporting News, and one of the articles was about the Portland Mavericks. I'd had a couple of great seasons in South Africa. We won a national championship. I got to be player of the year. I got to hit, which was really fun to do. And quite frankly, in my middle 20s, I thought I was a late bloomer. I thought I was better than I was. And then when this thing came up with the Mavericks, anybody could try out. I went back to Long Island after the season was over. Fortunately, Cape Town was winter baseball. So in April, I went back to Long Island, did some substitute teaching to raise a few bucks, and flew out to Portland thinking I'd have a summer of fun and tried out for the now fabled Portland Mavericks. The funny thing is, it stayed with me that my first outing, 3 innings in a tryout with 300 guys there, I think I struck out 5 guys in 3 innings. And I never did that. I used to strike out 2 guys a game at Cornell. In Cape Town, I struck out a lot more because there weren't that many lefties who could throw curveballs behind in the count. So I'm on a roll. My first day in Portland, literally my first day, strike out 4 or 5 guys in 3 innings. The afternoon newspaper the next day, Oregon Journal, says ball player from Africa shows up, might make the team. As luck would have it, no joke, the following Saturday night, I pitched again in the tryouts, and I got hit like a piñata. I got nobody out. And I knew that quite literally I had pitched myself off the team. And then the next morning, I went to see Bing Russell, Kurt Russell's dad, who owned the team. And I said, I know I've pitched myself off the team, but I'd like to stick around. Can I throw batting practice for $10 a day and sell tickets and do anything? And he gave me a chance. He said, we do have a ticket campaign. You could do that for us, and you can throw BP. And it's one of those things they used to call in Search of Excellence a long time ago, a book on business management by walking around. I kind of stuck with baseball just by sticking around. I just love the vibe of Portland, Oregon. I love the owner. I just loved all the guys. And they were just from all over the place. Some college players, some guys released 2, 3, 4 times. Some guys who were never worse, like me, never really getting a chance to play minor league ball. And it just worked out. As luck would have it, maybe a week into my stay here, I remembered a thing I had written when I was in college about a baseball day camp. And I showed it to Bing Russell, and I said, I'd like to set up the Little Mavericks baseball school on public land. And can I use your players? Can I use the Little Maverick name? I wasn't savvy enough to say, can I use your brand? I would say that now, but back then, I just wanted to find a way to stay in town because I really couldn't get a job. I mean, it's 4th of July weekend kind of thing. And he said, Rob, I love that idea. And we did it. So there are a lot of guys I see today in the city of Portland who say their first 2 jobs when they came here One was to pitch for Bing, and the other was to work for me at Little Maverick Baseball School. That baseball day camp changed everything for a number of reasons. One of the kids was Todd Field, who became the writer-director in Hollywood, who was the kid who was eating chopped up licorice out of a Red Man package in 1976. Said, Todd, what are you doing? And that was the inspiration for making gum in a pouch. So that was Todd Field. The other kid was Scott Chernoff, whose dad is the late, great Dan Chernoff, a patent and trademark attorney who did all the work for me on Big League Chew. He's also a Cornell guy. We were 10 years apart. But it seemed when I came out here, my life, my dad had said to me, your life is like Forrest Gump. Everywhere you go, something happens where somebody says, hey, that's a pretty cool idea. Let's do a baseball day camp. How about shredded gum in a pouch? When I told that idea to Jim Bouton in the bullpen, he said, I love that idea. And maybe a half inning later, he said, what would you call it? And again, just out of the blue, I said, I don't know, Big League Chew. So you can see why I'm so enthused about Portland, because it opened the doors for me. When Bing and I talked about Little Maverick Baseball School, he talked to Pat Bell, who was on the board for Parks and Recreation. In 2 days, I'm talking with the head of Parks and Rec, Bill Owens, and his assistant, Paul Keenan. And those guys, it's like in those old movies that say, hey, I've got a barn, let's put on a show kind of thing. You know, I could play the trumpet. And all these pieces, the Grant Little League at the time loaned me the equipment. I had about $9 in my pocket. It was astounding how it happened. And you probably have read the stats, and people have asked me, I did one interview in LA that was hilarious when the reporter said, I've looked at your numbers, and why did they invite you back the second year? Why did they invite you back the third year? You had to win a game, and your current average was north of 5. And I said, Bing Russell and I got along. We spoke the same language. He loved having guys who hung around for the love of the game. He just knew. He had said to me after the last season, he said, Rob, take some business classes at Portland State because your future is in the game, but it's not on the hill. And he didn't say that to be mean. He just said business is business, and you've got a future in baseball because you bring something to the table. That was the beauty of Bing Russell. He was like, the way they describe it in The Battered Bastards of Baseball, the documentary about the Mavs, Kurt Russell talks about his dad being like the music man. And we were like the saxophones and the trombones. We were just big players in his basically a stage play. And I'm so grateful for that. But it was not only Bing, it was all the people here in Portland. I love when I take my son Charlie to lacrosse practice at Delta Park in Portland. And right next to the lacrosse field is the Bill Owens Complex. They named it after Mr. Owens, the guy who set me up on day one in 1975. It's amazing.
Wow. It just seems like everything just started to line up for you. And like you said about just having that immediate group of guys being your family, I can certainly relate to that, playing a few years of college ball myself. And that certainly helps too, and just gets you acclimated. And what a great guy in Bing Russell to learn from too, and just be around and soak up, just being that brilliant businessman, and that adventurous, if you will, that he was. So you mentioned, coming up with the idea. You saw the Bat Boy eating the licorice in the pouch and coming up with the Big League Chew idea. When did you know you had the right formula? How long did that take you to finally get it?
It's funny when I give a talk at schools and they say this is the fellow who invented Big League Chew. The kids have a vision like I'm Mr. Wonka, and I'm in a factory and I'm mixing and matching and stuff. And I have to explain and say, no, it wasn't like that. I had a bachelor's degree in philosophy and a master's in teaching, and I'm not a chemist, and I'm really not a businessman either. But one thing I learned from Bing was to really keep things simple. With Bing, we didn't have a whole lot of one night, and that was about it. So he kept his promotion thing straightforward, really simple, and that's what I did with Big League Chew. I read an article literally in People magazine in January of 1970, and I found of a company where you could make your own bubble gum out of Arlington, Texas. And I bought a case of the stuff, and I made the first batch of Big League Chew myself with ingredients from the Fremont Stadium. And Todd and I in his mom's kitchen. His mom's name is Candy. Candy Field to use her kitchen because I had a typical ball player's apartment. I had no pots and pans. We could boil some hot dogs and have some cold ones in the fridge, but not much else. So Mrs. Field let us use her kitchen. She still lives there. And we made the first batch of Big League Chew. And the rest is history. Jim Bouton took it and he peddled it around. Jim always talked about how I had the inspiration and he was the perspiration because he really is the guy who made it happen. He pounded the pavement and he went to 5-6 companies and found a small division of Wrigley a long time ago. And, in January 1980, so your question, it was kind of a circuitous, answer to your question, but the question is, when did I know it was going to be a big deal? When they sent me the first batch and I opened it up and I looked at it, those shreds, and I smelled it, and it smelled like fun to me. And Bill Mayer was the original cartoonist out of Atlanta, Georgia. He was genius. He gave the guys kind of maniacal Mad Magazine look. They weren't handsome guys. They didn't look like Mickey Mantle or Willie Mays. They looked like Portland Mavericks, quite frankly. They were a little bit chunky, unshaven, the way I am this morning. It's kind of the motif, And so then I knew we had something that was big. When my dad, after he'd retired from NYPD, my mom and dad ended up living in Connecticut, and he went to a 7-Eleven and saw the gum in there, was rearranging the shelves, and he came home, and I was visiting at the time. You would have thought I'd won the Nobel Prize or I'd written a book or something. He said, "Rob, I saw your gum." And it's like we were so excited. Our first deal was a 3-year deal. Even the best and the brightest at Wrigley thought, this is a cute novelty. This will be cool. And after 6 months, we sat down and renegotiated the deal. As luck would have it now, about 10 years ago, I moved the brand to Buffalo, New York, just outside Buffalo, with a small company, Ford Gum. And it was like Back to the Future with me. It was people with a brand new enthusiasm. Wrigley had just been bought out by Mars, and I knew that my brand was a little bit tiny for a mega company like Mars Wrigley. And my agent out of Chicago, Bob Anderson, found George Steggy and his band of brothers who embraced bubblegum fun. It was a perfect match. Those guys have been awesome. And we're very close to selling our 1,000,000th pouch, which is astounding. Isn't that crazy? Well, it happened so fast. The pouches say over 800 million sold. And they told me recently, they said, we may have to skip 900 because we're this close to 1 billion. So sometime next year, it'll be that. I mean, it's the little idea that could. A left-hander with a 78-mile-an-hour fastball. It's crazy. It really is.
And only in baseball and only in America, too. I mean, that's such a unique story. And who would have thought it would have taken off like that? So you've been going at this. So is this around the 40th anniversary?
This would have been the 40th anniversary tour. I had designed the Shredmobile. I took a page out of the Wienermobile, and we were all set for me to hit the road and go to minor league towns and little leagues and so forth, but it didn't happen. So we'll do it. I'm guessing we'll do it in 2 years, the 42nd year. I'd like to try and do some kind of tie-in with the Jackie Robinson Foundation if I can. 42 being a magical number for baseball, and of course a magical number for Big League Chew. We'll see how that goes, but I know I'll be on the road sometime soon. So check a local ballpark. It'll be out there.
That's right. So what has been, like, by and far the coolest experience for you involving the brand over the last 40 years?
It's hard to say. Most recently, I think the one thing that really stands out now, put a girl on the pouch. And how many coaches and how many players, women and girls, who said, this is so great. They just were, and the batter's left-handed and she looks intense, and just the whole idea of embracing Big League Chew is bubblegum fun for everybody. Baseball, softball, even if you're just a fan of the game. So I love when people know that I'm the gum guy. Every Halloween, the Yellow House on 18th Avenue here in Portland, people know that's the gum guy. And I like that. It's part of the thing my dad used to talk about, that rather than being rich and famous, it's probably cooler to be comfortable and anonymous. And And that has stayed with me. And except for Halloween, that's pretty much the case. Although I will say this, New Balance made some Big League Chew shoes. And in fact, I'm wearing them. Let me just do a little plug for New Balance here. But they made these shoes. New Balance thing, the other side, I'll take that shoe off too, has Out of Here Original on it. Let me show you. I couldn't believe New Balance approached me and said, "We'd like to do some kind of." I said, "Mom, my daughter's at BU. I'll be in Boston in a month. Let's have a meeting." And again, it was like starting a little Maverick baseball school. We sat down, supposed to be 3 guys at a meeting. It was 12 because they put the memo out that the Big League Chew guy is going to be in town, and everybody wanted to tell their own bubblegum story. That is when you know, back to your original question about what's the most fun for me. You know, it'll be a bartender, a barista at a coffee shop. I love when a woman says, "I love that stuff. I've been chewing that since I was 9." You know, and everybody seems to have a Big League Chew story. Whether they struck out 5 times or had the game-winning hit, there's always a connection in somebody's life, it seems, that Big League Chew was a part of it, and that really makes me happy.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I don't see those stories and those connections stopping anytime soon either. But we got a few rapid fire questions for you here, so strap in.
Sure, fire away.
All right, ready? Favorite baseball movie?
Well, I've got to go with the Battered Bastards of Baseball, but after that, I'm going to go with The Natural. You got to remember, Redford was the left-hander and Roy Hobbs, and they filmed that movie in Buffalo, so it's a particularly important one for the Ford Gum people. But yeah, Battered Bastards because it's a big thank you to Bing Russell. And if you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. It's free. It's only 80 minutes long, and it's really fun. The Natural speaks for itself. I mean, I read the book a long time ago, and Barry Levinson changed the ending, and I'm glad he did because I love when those lights explode and Redford trots around the bases. So those are my 2. If I had to pick one other, it would be A League of Their Own because I think Tom Hanks and that whole cast of characters, Madonna, just were fantastic.
Yeah, no, those are some good ones right there. That's for sure. So what about you're going to the ballpark? What's your go-to food?
I'm hot dog, mustard, and a cold beer.
Yeah, doesn't get much better than that.
Sauerkraut if they have it. Some minor league parks will have sauerkraut in the dog. It takes me back to walking the streets of New York and getting a food cart dog.
That's right.
Gould's mustard, basic stuff. I'm not a fancy food guy. I'm not a sushi guy at the ballpark.
Yeah, no, I agree. So if you had to choose, might be a tough question, who was your favorite teammate?
My favorite teammate. Holy cow. That's really hard. It's really hard. I think I'm going to go with Gary Bedingfield, my catcher for the Anfield Spartans in the British National League. Gary is an expert on baseball in wartime. He's so articulate, and playing baseball for the Spartans, won a couple of British National League championships back in the 90s. Gary was the straw that stirred that drink. He just was so disciplined. When he was a kid, he made his own catcher's mask out of coat hangers. It's like out of a movie, really. But he was the soul of the Anfield Spartans, and I see him once every 5 years. He's a spectacular teammate, and he was the key to the Spartan victories.
Wow, that's all. That sounds like the MacGyver of baseball. That's pretty cool.
In many ways, yeah.
Who's one player you would have? I know you mentioned you pitched against Mike Schmidt, but who's one player you would have loved to have pitched against?
I would have loved to pitch against Ozzie Smith, and I never got the chance because Ozzie was with Walla Walla in, I think, 75, maybe 77, when his first year of minor league ball, and he played for the Walla Walla Padres. And I never got to pitch against him. Quite frankly, I didn't get to pitch against too many people at all. I mean, going back to my Maverick career, I only won 1 game in 3 years for the Portland Mavericks. I was kind of a big deal, big fish in a little pond in Sydney and Cape Town and in London. But with the Mavs, I was more known for bubblegum and a baseball day camp. So, but yes, Ozzie would be the man. And I've met him a couple of times because he's very active in the Hall of Fame. He does an intern breakfast for the Hall of Fame. The newbies that come in there. He is one of the most active Hall of Famers in terms of doing stuff for the Hall of Fame. Doesn't surprise me at all. But when I met Ozzie and they said, Rob was on the Portland Mavericks, he said, man, you guys are like a Marine unit. You would just really, he said, I love playing against you because you had to have your A game because it was a rough and tumble band of guys. But I love Ozzie and I love the way he plays. And he would have gone 4 for 4, but it would have been enjoyable.
At least, yeah, an enjoyable 4 for 4 if there was such a thing on the mound. What are some of your favorite players to watch today?
Oh, again, I go to left. I'm going to stick with one guy, Clayton Kershaw. In fact, I've got it around here. I just bought his glove. My Southampton baseball school, first time this year, we didn't get to do it in 35 years. And next year, I'm bringing it back. And I got a Clayton Kershaw glove because to me, he's like the Sandy Koufax of this generation. And I just love the way he behaves, whether his team is doing well or not, whether he's pitching well or not. He just has that focus and that class that I hope to teach the kids in my baseball camp today. But Kershaw to me is the man.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
No. And that filthy curveball he has is ridiculous.
Yes.
What is your favorite Big League Chew flavor?
I've got 2 answers to that. And I'm going to reveal a secret here. When I get into a bubblegum blowing competition with kids, I go with the grape. Ground ball grape is a little more leathery to me. So I got more durability with my bubbles. But, bottom of the 9th, if I've got to go out and pitch the bottom of the 9th, I'm probably going to grab some original. Yeah. Kind of an old school guy. Although I will say this, the new blue raspberry that we came out with a couple of years ago is killer. And now we've got the girl on the pouch in a Slammin' Strawberry. Also awesome. But being an old school guy, I'm going to go grape and original. It's kind of like fastball curveball to me,
That's it. The 1-2 combo there. All right, we'll finish with the extra innings question, I like to call it. So you get to travel back in time and visit any game in the history of baseball and share a pack of Big League Chew with any 3 people. Who are you splitting the pack with, and what game are you going to?
I couldn't name a specific game, but I definitely would go back to see Satchel Paige pitching to Josh Gibson. So each of those guys get whatever flavor Big League Chew they want. And then the third one, I think I would love to have been there when Hank Aaron hit the ball into the left field seats, left field bullpen, actually, when Tom House, his teammate, ran and caught the ball. But I would have loved to have been there to watch Mr. Aaron trot around the bases because, to me, he's just the heart and soul of baseball. So I think those would be my guys. It's a great extra innings question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. My daughter's name is Paige. We thought we were going to have twins. And I jokingly asked Sarah, what would you think of Satchel and Paige? And she said, Rob, I'm struggling with a son named Satchel. But she said, I kind of like Paige. And as luck would have it, that time we only had one, and her name is Paige. And then we did have twins after that, 5 years later. And it's Jane and Charlie. And I was pushing for Roger and Maris. And I had no success with that. I finally said, how about Buddy and Holly? And Sarah said, well, that'll be the day. So that didn't happen either. But we do have Jane. We do have Charlie. But in terms of baseball, we've got Satchel Paige in our family. It's pretty cool.
No, that's awesome. Well, Rob, I've really enjoyed our time here today, and I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, this has been a pleasure. Thanks for having me. This is very cool. This never gets old for me.
That wraps up today's conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please give our podcast a like and share it with your friends. And if you have a baseball-related story to tell that you would like to have featured on the show, drop us a line in the comments, or you can send a direct message to our Facebook page. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Jim Tunison, and this is For Love of the Game.